Welcome to my tutorial on positive flying for the BMS F-16. It's a method that I believe was developed by the US Air Force in the 1940s to ensure the airmen could fly safely and predictably with the minimum amount of training. The value in flight simulation is that it makes flying to the numbers, in formation with other aircraft, and in a multiplayer environment both significantly easier and more accurate. In short, with this simple method you should be able to avoid years of frustration and struggle, and with a little practice quickly master everything from close formation flying to tactical flying to in-air refueling and more. So how does it work? Well, the method is simple. It's based on the principle that for any aircraft the performance, measured as airspeed, that number over there, or if you prefer the number over there, is always a combination of a certain power setting and a certain attitude. The attitude we are going to read off our heads-up display on the pitch ladder, and the power setting we'll use the fuel flow indicator, which is over there. And you'll notice that at the moment for straight and level flights at about 300 knots I'm using a fuel flow of about 3,800 pounds per hour. So in order to maintain an airspeed, you fix either the attitude or power and then vary the other value in order to get what you want. So for example, if you set the attitude at straight and level, you find a power setting that ensures your airspeed what you want to be, and then you read that setting and remember it, and next time when you want to get back to the airspeed, you simply put that setting back in. As long as you're at the same altitude, in other words you're flying through the same sort of air density, you'll get the same airspeed. Alternatively, you might set the power and then move your nose up and down until you have the correct attitude to maintain the airspeed. You use this in ascent and descent. The key is once you've established your airspeed, you don't change your power or your attitude, and that way your airspeed stays what you want it to be. So let's try that now. At the moment we're doing 300 knots, we're at flight level 160, and we want 350 knots. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to increase the power to accelerate, all quite obvious. When I get to 350, I'm going to arrest and find the power setting that holds 350 knots, and I'm going to read it and remember it. Again, I'm remembering it so that when I want that airspeed again later on at the same flight level, I simply plug it in and the aircraft will settle where I want it to be. So let's push the throttle forward to accelerate. You can see the airspeed increasing. Right, we're getting close, and I'll start pulling the throttle back. And just find that power setting that holds it. There we go, and that seems about right. So about 4,950 to 5,000 pounds per hour gives me my 350 knots approximately at flight level 160. Now as long as I don't change that, my straight and level flight is going to be predictable. Now why do I want it to be like that? Well, really, if you think about it, you're going to, in the multiplayer environment, often have wingmen flying right off you, or flying off at a combat spread or in some other similar tactical formation. If they can rely on you flying the airspeed that you've said you're going to fly, they can be in the right position. If they're on your wing, they can actually stay in formation and do other things inside the cockpit that you need them to do. And overall, it just makes the multiplayer experience possible. Another reason you'd want to be able to set the airspeed is, again, mentioned in-air refueling earlier on. If you get behind the tanker and you know the tanker's doing 300 knots, if you know how to set 300 knots, you're going to be stable behind the tanker. It's not going to be difficult. Right, so let's have a look at the descent. So what I want to do is I want to descend down to, let's say, flight level 100, and I'm going to maintain my airspeed while doing so. So what I'll do is I'll pitch down and pull the power back until my power setting is about 2,000 pounds per hour. There we go, about 2,000 pounds per hour. Pitch down a little bit more, and what you'll notice is the airspeed's roughly constant, but now I'm going down. Again, from the point of view of wingmen, flying next to you, you're making their life much, much easier by giving them a predictable environment which to fly through. From time to time you'll fly through turbulence. It'll make your airspeed indicator go a bit nuts. All you do is fly through it, and then once you're through it, pitch up or down to correct your airspeed so that it's what you want it to be. Right, so that's how you do the descent. One thing you will notice is as the air becomes denser, your fuel flow is going to increase. Now you can either allow it to increase, or you can just gradually pull the throttle back a little bit more to maintain a 2,000 pound per hour fuel flow. If you want to level off, all we're going to do is we're going to slowly throttle forward while bringing the nose up. I throttled forward a little bit too much there, it doesn't matter. There we go, and we'll now find the power that holds that airspeed. And it's around about 4,600, it's giving me a nice 350 knot, close to 350 knot airspeed, so that's the number I'll keep in mind and make small adjustments if I start dropping too low. Now ascent is pretty much the same thing. All you do is, again, you're going to use a fixed power and then use the pitch to vary your airspeed. So let's climb to back to flight level 160. I'm going to push the throttle forward and bring the nose up. And I'll use my pitch to control my airspeed. So there I'm going too fast, so I'll just bring the nose up higher. Allow myself to slow down a little bit and bring the nose down once I've reached the airspeed that I want. So there we go, gently push the nose forward again. All the while not touching the throttle. And now I'm nearing my flight level 160, so I'm going to get the nose down, pull the throttle back, again everything quite gently, level off. And there we go, about 4650 was our power setting. And 350, straight and level. And that is, in essence, is how positive flying works. If you know what the values are that you're looking for, then it's quite easy. And if you're used to flying in certain configurations, it's useful to make a note of some of those values, and then you can let your wingman know what to expect in the briefing. But in essence, just remember that a certain attitude plus a certain power setting will give you a certain airspeed, and that's all you need to know. So thinking about using positive flying and getting the very best out of it, you need to consider a few things. The one is that this isn't going to work if you don't do the instrument scan regularly, because you're always going to get your setting just slightly off, and the way you notice it is that your values vary. So you need to learn the instrument scan, and the instrument scan should be performed every few seconds. I prefer about every 5 seconds. And the way to learn it, if you're not already doing it, I found a useful way is to get hold of an exercise timer, and then set it to beep every 5 seconds. And when it beeps, consciously read and take in your airspeed, your attitude, which is the flight path marker relative to the pitch ladder, and your altitude. In the beginning, that's going to take up pretty much all 5 seconds of every time it beeps. But keep it up, and eventually you'll take those values in a fraction of a second. So it doesn't matter what you're doing. You might be scanning the radar for enemy, you might be flying off somebody's wing, you might be doing one of a number of things. The main key point to remember is that every 5 seconds or so you need to look up at your primary flight instruments, read your airspeed, your attitude, your altitude, and make sure you take it in. You develop that habit and flying is going to become far, far easier. The second thing is to get into the habit of always flying by the numbers. So you should never find yourself flying at an airspeed, an attitude, or an altitude that you haven't consciously chosen. If you decide to climb at 300 knots, cruise at 350 knots, and you're going to be flying at flight level, say 200, then those are the numbers you should be flying. You should be flying them pretty much exactly. If you don't, you're simply not in control of your aircraft. You might think you are, but you're not. On the other hand, if you make this a habit from day one and use the instrument scan to keep validating that you're doing what you think you're doing, then it's all going to become trivially easy in very, very little time. And this will in turn unlock all the other flying that so many struggle to achieve and to master. The last thing is that once adopted, you should use positive flying every time you fly. Regardless of which aircraft or simulator you're using, it's a habit that needs to be ingrained to succeed. Now, if you're interested in how to take this into the world of formation flight, then stay tuned for the next episode in my Positive Flying series. Until then, remember to practice this with every maneuver of every flight in every simulator, and from every moment takeoff to touchdown. Hope this was useful. Until next time, happy flying.